Welcome back to the Inviting Shift Show. I'm your host, Christina Smith, and today we have a really great guest. So if you are a Generation Xer, you may have been raised with the thought that you can have it all. And that may have been your goal. And sometimes in midlife, we get a little tired of that goal. Well, my guest today is Dr. Lisa Petty. She earned her doctorate researching what gets in the way of midlife women taking care of their well-being. As a midlife mentor, she now helps women navigate the big questions of life, like who am I now? What's next for me? Her book is called Forget About Having It All, The Midlife Woman's Guide to Creating the Life You Want. This is a really juicy conversation, so I hope that you tune in. And if you want it all, we're going to have you question, what is all? Well, podcast listeners, I'd love you to welcome Dr. Lisa Petty to the Inviting Shift podcast. Thank you for being here.
Oh, I am so excited to chat with you today. Thanks so much for inviting me.
I am excited too, because I can't wait to talk about your book. But first, why don't you tell us a little bit of how did you get into midlife alchemy and what does that mean to you?
Oh, that's a really good question because people don't really understand sometimes what alchemy even means. So let's start with that. First of all, the simplified definition of alchemy that I like to use is that it turns the mundane into something magical or marvelous. So it's not, me trying to turn iron into gold or anything like that. It's just about taking a ho-hum experience and turning it into something incredibly powerful. Wow. So how did I get here? Well, I started my career working with women as a holistic nutritionist, and I've only worked ever with women because I get women, right? I understand how our bodies work. We have similar, everybody has a different life experience, but we have similar concerns and similar things that we want to achieve in our lives in terms of staying fit. Anyway, so I had been working with women, and I noticed as I got older, my clients got older, and I started to see that they weren't necessarily following through on some of the things that we agreed that they would do in terms of whatever they were going to do to release weight or improve their mood or clear up their skin or whatever the thing was that they wanted to do. Well, they weren't doing it. So they said they would do it. That's a great plan. And then they would come back to our next session and I'd say, so how'd you do with that? And they'd say, yeah, I didn't do any of it. And so this became sort of a theme. They would come back saying, I didn't do it. So as a professional myself, going into midlife, I was starting to have this like professional crisis. Like, why am I not able to help these women? Am I not good at it anymore? Is there some kind of a skill gap? Do I need to get some more training? So that's one stream. That's my professional sort of identity. And then on the other side, as I was approaching midlife and my baby, I have 2 children, my baby was looking at university brochures. I'm like, oh my gosh. And my clairvoyance kicked in. Kidding. I don't have clairvoyance, but I could see into the future. And I knew that pretty soon I'd have an empty house and it would be me and the 4 walls. And the writing was on the wall. Your life is going to change in amazingly powerful ways. What are you going to do about it? And for women who are listening right now, and, going through any kind of life transition, maybe your kids are leaving home, maybe your marriage is ending, maybe you're starting to feel unsettled in your career, bored in your career, or whatever. Whenever there's a major life transition, you're just like, oh my gosh, I don't know who I am if I'm not X, Y, Z, or if I'm not doing X, Y, Z. So I started to have my own personal midlife reframing experience, right? Like, oh, who am I going to be now? And so what I decided to do, because I like to operate from logic, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, and reason is like, okay, well, I'll just go back to school and get more training, because for one thing, I won't notice that my son is in his last year of high school if I'm also at grad school, right? So I decided to get my master's degree, first of all, focused on midlife women and the experience of eating. And then the research bug bit, and I thought, okay, a bigger question, a bigger thing that I want to understand is, what is the experience that midlife women have with self-care and well-being? And what is that like? And what gets in the way? And what keeps them on track? And all of that kind of thing. So I ended up getting a doctorate in that. At the same time, of course, I'm going through my own sort of, who am I now? And what am I going to do next? And all of that kind of question that I'm sure a lot of women who are listening can resonate with. So how we got to alchemy is the findings from my research coupled with the teachings that I've done with women. And now I can say the coaching that I've done with women and the mentorship I've done has shown me that at midlife, we have this huge opportunity to change. We have the ability, there is space, our exterior has changed, and it's given us an opening to reframe who we are and what we want to create next. Because, I mean, God willing, we're going to be here for another several decades, right? And nobody wants to feel bored or useless or like it doesn't make any sense or that their best days are behind them, right? We all want to feel inspired and creative and like it makes sense and there's a purpose, right, for being here and still breathing. And so that's where the alchemy comes in, this idea that we can stop living on autopilot, stop doing the things that everybody expects us to do, and start really connecting with our own inner wisdom about our purpose and who we want to be in the world.
It's beautiful. It's like you're telling my story, because I got to tell you, I think today in my late 40s, I'm happier than I've ever been. And I've done a lot of work to get there. I had to start asking myself that question.
Yes.
What do I actually want? Instead of, like you said, we get stuck in that mundane routine of just like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And we don't really question that until sometimes we have these big life changes. And mine happened a little earlier because my son moved to go be with his father. So it was like, now what do I do with all this time that I've been taking care of this? And for me, I was crying on the way to work for a year before I was like, what is going on? Until I was like, oh, maybe that's my inner wisdom saying I should be doing something different. But it took me a long time because I had a very good on paper kind of life where I had the great husband, I had the great kid, we had a house, we had more money than I had when I was growing up. So it was like, we could pay all of our bills, no worries. Like the surviving was over. And when that was over, it felt even harder to thrive than it did to survive. And so I know that I love the title of your book, which is like, forget about having it all. Because that is something I learned as well. Like we can put so many things on a vision board, but then for me anyway, my experience is that it felt really heavy. Like I have to do all of these really huge things. So tell me a little bit more about your book and how it's going to help us shift our perspective and create some alchemy.
So that was a perfect segue, your explanation of how you had the quote unquote perfect life. You had the husband and the house and the child. You didn't have 2.5 children, but I'll forgive you for that.
You did have a dog though.
And the dogs and the white picket fence and all of those kinds of things. They're put out as these ideals that we quote unquote should have, right? We should have this stuff. And so first of all, that's a problem in and of itself. But I do want to talk about that. But once we get to midlife and we've ticked off all those boxes, all those shoulds. Okay, I got all the shoulds. A lot of women then start to go, so now what? Right?
Right.
Who am I now that I've done all the things I'm supposed to do? So let's go back to the supposed to do. So as you said, and thank you for mentioning my book, Forget About Having It All. Cheeky title, that I love to bits because it's a foil for the pressures on women that started sort of in the early 80s. So Gen Xers, early millennials, late boomers all grew up with this concept that we can have it all. And it was handed to us like this beautiful gift. Here you go, have it all. And instead of becoming this gift that opened us up to choice, it became that to-do list, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not only can I have a career and a family, excuse me, sorry, and beautiful real estate and, you know, all of these consumer things that we are programmed to want because that's part of having it all, right? So we're constantly on this hamster wheel of must consume, must get more because that's what all is. We bought into this and it became not a gift. It became, again, this checklist. Not a you can, but you must. Mm-hmm. And so women have had all of this pressure on us for the last 40 years, the generation in midlife now, to have it all, which, as we were talking about off air, means do it all. Mm-hmm. And so it is no wonder that we are exhausted and overwhelmed and disappointed and frustrated, and also looking to the future saying, I don't want this anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, this is ridiculous to be in constant pursuit of this stuff that, and this is the light bulb moment, I don't even know that I want.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Mm-hmm. So at midlife, we have this opportunity, perhaps for the first time in our lives as women, to do that deep inner work and really try to understand what it is that we want, right? And, you know, that's kind of the second step. What do you want? The first step is, who am I? That's the question that needs to be answered first, because it's the one that most people ask, most women ask. I hear in different groups that I'm in, or sitting around even at a party or a dinner out at a restaurant, I don't even know who I am anymore. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right. Because we've taken on all these roles that all that time that we were mom, we were wife, we were worker, we were whatever, but we never really stopped to go, well, what do I want for me?
Right. Insert your name here. What does Lisa want? Right. What does Christine want? What does Mary want? What does Betty want? What does Stephanie want? We don't know. We were never asked, but we don't even know, like, who is Lisa? Take away my kids, take away past relationships, take away my career, take away the fact that I have a puppy. Take all of that away. Who's Lisa? And that's a really key piece of the puzzle, right? Wow. To understand who you are as a woman.
And I think often we've just completely lost that because we've been so busy doing what we think we should for all these other parts of our lives. And then, I understand why we're exhausted and we don't know who we are. And that's why I love midlife, because it was a time where, I went to therapy and they started asking me questions like this. Who are you? What do you want? And I remember the first time they asked me those questions, I was just like, what do you mean? I'm a mom and I'm a wife and I didn't even know how to describe myself outside of that. And it led to me getting into a lot more art because I was like, maybe I'm an artistic person. And that was really new to me too. But I had to start exploring, like, actually, who am I and why haven't I given myself any time to figure this out? This is like a maintenance that I think that we should have on ourselves that I'm shitting us now. But that we could, I invite
It's hard
us.
to avoid that word. Yeah.
I invite us to look at, who am I and what does that actually mean without all these roles and responsibilities? Because I think that just puts us into that space where we feel like we have to produce or give or generate in order to be worthy. And that puts us in a really bad space as well.
Yes, I think a movie that popped into my head when you were talking was a Julia Roberts movie, Runaway Bride. And if you're familiar with that movie, the character didn't even know how she liked her eggs because she chose eggs based on whatever partner she was with at the time. And so if you think of yourself in your social roles of wife, mother, teacher, sister, daughter, insert all of the roles that you inhabit. You act as if you're a daughter when you're being a daughter. You act as if you're a mother when you're being a mother. Do you really know who you are? How do you like your eggs? Like, how do you want to be? And that is the next question. So once you understand who you are, the next question is, how do you want to be? And to me, that is the answer to everything. As soon as you know how you want to be, it's like it kicks off a domino effect, and every other decision you make becomes super duper easy because it either aligns with how you want to be or it doesn't. And so for people who are listening, and are saying, well, I don't even know what I want. I change my mind every 5 minutes. That's because you need to do that deep work. You need to really know yourself. Insert your name here. Who am I? What do I like? What do I not like? What feelings are important to me? So I mentioned earlier how I used to be Mrs. Logic. Now I can call myself Dr. Logic. But the funny story is that after going to school, graduate school, for 6 years to get my doctorate, I realized at the end of it that it was a safety mechanism for me to stay inside my head. And that in reality, that is not where my truth is. My truth is not in my head. Neither is it in your head. So all of you women who pride yourself on your intellect and your logic and your ability to, quote unquote, not be emotional, I invite you to shift out of your brain, because that is not where your wisdom lies. In fact, I think that that's probably where your limitation and your fear actually lies. That sense of holding you back from the infinite possibilities of your life because you go through your checklist, of all the reasons why it won't work, or all the reasons why you, quote unquote, shouldn't do it. And instead, when you get back into your inner wisdom and your body and your feelings, how do I want to be? How do I want to feel? The innate intuitive wisdom that we all have, whether or not you think you do, you do. That's where we need to get back to. And that it was the big leap in understanding that I went through after getting my doctorate, that the answers are in fact not in my head, they're in my heart and in my body.
That's amazing. I have a doctorate client. I mean, very similar story. She's so smart. And we were just having this conversation last night, which is so funny, because she has a real hard time trusting her heart space because her head space was so commended and awarded and rewarded. And so she really puts her value on, I can think myself out of things. And when it comes to what we truly want, if we start thinking about it, what happens is we go back to external validation. What would people expect from me? What would be the next right step? What should I do? Instead of like, hold on, what do I even crave to do? What do I desire to do? Like, what really
lights me up
deep inside me that I want to step into? And even though it hasn't been safe for some people when they were young to be in that space, right? I think that as midlife, I've seen a lot of women starting shifting into getting more into their bodies, more into their heart space and their inner wisdom, because that's all in our body. And I think that, at least for me, I can catch myself being really stuck in my head. And because it is a safe place. I was also talking to my husband about this last night. Like, I would rather sit here and do this thing that is behind the computer than have to show up to a group of 50 people and speak. Like, even though I know that would benefit me more, there's a part of me that, you know, doesn't want to do those hard things, right? It's much easier to sit behind our computers and hide away than it is to be seen and heard.
Okay, so that again is part of the social programming. Just like the social program You Can Have It All, right, which in my learned opinion, I have a doctorate on this now from my head. In my learned opinion, that was a mantra put into place so that we were so busy that we were always looking for that external validation. We were always looking for truth outside of ourselves. We were always trying to keep up with the Joneses and keep up appearances to keep us from the wisdom of our own connection. And I'm talking spiritual health here. You can use the word God, universe, creator, the one, all that is, whatever language works for you. We are all connected. And when we are looking for external validation and when we are falling into the social programming, of which having it all is just one, we are not connecting with our true power. And I think it is intentional from systems outside of ourselves to keep us programmed into these ideas that I shouldn't do that. That's not appropriate for me. A woman my age shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. How dare I think about retraining when I'm almost 50? You know, how dare I think about leaving this relationship that is just dead? What would the people think? You know, it's all programming from outside of us. And that's another part of this trying to figure out who I am, is to really dig into some of those beliefs and cultural expectations and unplugging from the ones that don't serve your highest good. And that is tricky because those systems outside of ourselves are relentless. You know, good example. Twice now we have in rapid succession had some major events in Hollywood. One was in Hollywood, the Grammy Awards, and we were all distracted by whether one celebrity did something to her face or not. Huge conversations. I'm not even going to name names. Right. You know who I'm talking about? And people poured so much energy into their opinion about what this one woman did to her face or didn't do to her face. I'm like, what wasted energy that is, that could be directed inward and making your life the most vibrant life that is that you're capable of creating. Just happened again. We just had Super Bowl. And we're having another conversation about whether one pregnant singer gave it her all on the halftime show. Why are we having these inane conversations? Why are we diverting our attention to that programming that says this is what is important, this stuff out here? Mm-hmm. And I suggest that perhaps it's not important. Right. And any energy you divert to that cult of Hollywood, that cult of stardom, is probably better used doing that inner work that you talked about earlier, and creating your own fabulous existence.
Right. Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. And, you know, I think a lot of marketing and media and capitalism all has to do a lot with that, is how we judge each other. I mean, these are powerful women that we should be celebrating. They've done really glorious things in their lifetimes. They've created a lot of really beautiful music for us. And instead of celebrating them, we have this, what I'm hearing is there's like this societal structure that creates us to continue to judge others rather than being like, good for her. She's on that stage. She made it that far. Like, woohoo, look at her go. Right. And I think that can be a culture of women If you want to like how you show up every day of your life, then you need to get intentional. And that's part of the intentional and aligned method that I will be presenting soon. But for now, I want you to get really clear. What is it that you want? Who are you now? What's most important to you? So that you can get clear on your intentions. These are the first steps that every single one of my coaching clients do when we get together, because I need to know what direction they're pointed in. So if you're not sure what direction you're pointed in, I have created the intentions blueprint for you. You'll get the first 3 module overviews of how exactly I take my clients through all the steps to get exactly clear on how it is that they want to show up, what their intentions are, so that they can feel good about themselves even when the goal doesn't turn out the way that they want to. It's a very simple process, and I've outlined it all in the intentions blueprint. You can grab the link below or go to christina-smith.com/intentions blueprint. I don't want to get too tangential, so I don't know if we're far off from where we started, but we were on
it's about social programming,
okay.
Right? And it's that idea of how we are our culture programs us to be petty, my name notwithstanding, to be judgmental of other people and ourselves, and be overly self-critical, because that keeps us small. And then we're not system disruptors if we're staying small and playing the game.
We stay on that hamster wheel.
Right? Well, staying on that hamster
where
wheel.
They want us to be.
Where they want us to be, continually consuming, because that's part of the game, right? Do you have the new iPhone yet? Have you changed your wardrobe this season? Is your 2-year-old car ready for like, what is that all about? And it's not just consumerism, it's everything. So the idea of the book is to my book, Forget About Having It All. That's just one aspect of the social programming, and it's one that women can understand right off the bat. I know what that programming is.
Oh, and I feel that when you're saying it, because like I grew up really in bad circumstances. So like when I was in my early 20s, I could go and buy myself anything because I was working, and I could, buy the clothes that I never had before and all the shoes and stuff. And by my mid 20s, I was like, I just didn't find any joy in it. Because it was like, I just have to go buy more. And then I was spending more money, and I didn't understand why I was doing this. And so I knew from my early 20s that something felt off about the whole consumerism and the amount of consumerism. But I don't think it was until my early 40s. So I was like, oh, I see. I'm just not a good American in this way.
Well, I'm Canadian, and I feel the same way. And there's nothing wrong.
There's nothing wrong with wanting things. It just,
there's nothing
to constantly crave things. Yes. I crave experiences. I crave having people I love around. And but I had to tune in before I was like, oh, that's actually what makes me happy. Not this stuff, right? But if we stay on the hamster wheel, it's very easy to just take in the messages without even realizing we're taking in the messages.
And part of it too is once you've got, use the expression, the golden handcuffs or whatever, once you're in the habit of consuming, then you have to keep the job that is soul sucking and killing you, that you hate, that is making you sick, that, fill in the blank. You have to keep that job to keep having that, buying the things, right? And if you stopped buying the things that you don't really want, like, do you really need to replace whatever? If it's functional and you bought, so for me, I like to buy quality, and then, and if I love it, I love it. I love beauty in my space. I buy the best quality in my budget. And that's one way that I can control that outward expense kind of thing. And then I have the space then, I don't have a house that's beyond my requirements. Therefore, I am not tied to a mortgage that keeps me tied to the job that is soul sucking, right? The less we get plugged into that consumer programming, the more freedom we have to make shifts about who we are and what we want to create.
And for me, it's like time is the thing that I can't get back, right? Like you can always make more money, but time is the thing that I can't get back. And for me to have all of the things meant maintaining all of those things. And it's like you said, yeah, we can have it all, but do we want to?
Yes. So thanks for going back there, because
I'm sorry,
that's something.
Air. So I brought up.
Yeah. So, I am not suggesting that you cannot have what you want. In fact, that is exactly what I'm suggesting. So forget about having what everybody else says you should have. Instead, they figure out what you want. And if that means you can drop some stuff, you can push some, yay. Like you've made space in your life. You have probably conserved some energy, right? Because as you said, you have to maintain. You have a big house. You have to clean a big house.
Or you have to work more to hire a maid so that they can clean the big house.
Exactly. So if your needs are met in a way that makes you feel good about what you have in your space, and you're not worried about, you know what, I don't need a new car. You know what, I don't need X, Y, Z. Therefore, I don't have to attach to that, to the energy, the physical energy output to maintain that. And now I have space for a new idea to come in because I'm not so tired and cranky and miserable because of all these things I'm doing. Because as we said, having it all means a lot of doing. If we can let some of those things go that don't even matter to us. And at midlife, there's this beautiful letting go that just happens naturally. So whether or not you had children, certainly once you hit perimenopause and menopause, the ability to have children is gone. And therefore that space opens up for creative pursuits. You found art. That is what women are here to do, right? Whether or not you have children, we are the creators. And so create, whatever that means to you, right? Create. And I can hear you, some women now saying, but I'm not creative. Yes, you are creative.
In some way you are.
You have some creativity, whether you like to garden or decorate or sew clothing or style what you wear or make jewelry or whatever. There's something. If you like to sing, if you play an instrument, whatever, there's something that is creative. And if you pour your energy into your creativity, you're going to increase your creative ability, right? Just like any other muscle. So when you're not exhausted from doing stuff you don't want to do, you can be more creative and create the life you really want, which is the tagline for my book.
Yes. And I think that's so important what you just said about the creativity, because I feel like at least clients that come to me are often like, I don't have time for me. But it's because they're so busy doing all of these things that they think they should do or have to do, or whatever their message is around that production is always the goal. It seems like, there's always like, but creativity, I'm not producing anything. Like if I'm not going to paint something that's going to go in the Louvre, then I must, that might be a waste of time. And it's such a different thing for me. It took me a really long time to paint. And so, because I had all these beliefs from my elementary school days and all my art shame. And so it took me a really long time. And then a friend of mine was like, Christina, you just put colors on the dang canvas and you swish them around and it's fun. And I was like, what are you talking about? I love it. Do I have hundreds of canvases that probably don't belong on any wall? Absolutely. But I had a blast making them. And it even helped me, like, it got me into that, what we were talking about earlier, the spiritual, more like heart space kind of side of me. It gets us out of our head. And I think that that's the most important for me, is that it helps me slow down and remember that I am not my production. I don't have to
Yes.
produce in order to be worthy. I don't have to make things or do things in order for me to feel like I have value.
Yes. Yes. Well, that's part of the having slash doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this idea of productivity that is very masculine energy that, constantly producing. And I'm not dissing masculine energy. We all have masculine
They're
and
both
feminine
needed.
energy. But this idea of having it all meant that women moving into the corporate culture, which is incredibly patriarchal, incredibly masculine, where we have somebody on the top and telling everybody else what to do, right? And go into that culture. Again, part of that culture is, stop being so emotional. You need to be logical. We need to use reason. So women, in order to fit into that culture, and I did it too. In the 80s, I had the suits with the big shoulder pads and the big hair. I did it. We had to be big, we had to take up space in some way. And so we showed up like men. And we let our feminine energy dissipate. We just let her shrink. And truthfully, for women, that is where our power lies, in our emotion, in our heart space, in our intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to re-engage with that connection, with our intuition and with our emotion, because that's where our wisdom is. And that means getting out of your head. Your head is meant to check your work, right? Like, once the decision has been embodied, right? Once your body has given you the decision, your brain says, okay, well, in order to accomplish that, these are the steps we need to take, right? Not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Not, is this a good idea? Well, let's think that through. You're never going to get to the inspired answer using your brain.
Sure. I mean, you might get to a logical one, but logical doesn't mean that we enjoy it, right? Logical always reminds me of how I grew up, and my parents would be like, when you went to college, you're going to be happy. When you graduate college, you're going to be happy. You're going to be happy. And that happy was always somewhere in the distance.
Out there.
Right, out there, because I couldn't do it now. I had to show up and do all of these things before I could earn that. And that's just, it's been a big shift back to realizing that my intuitive, my heart center, my body shows me how to do it in a way that feels good on the way, not just when I get there. So I think that it's because I've answered a lot of those questions now, like, who am I? I am someone who wants to feel divine love, intentional connection. Like, I have my own intention words. And so if that's what I want to feel when I get there, then I got to put that in now. And that slows down my production, right? It slows down a lot of things, because I living mindfully and intentionally can slow us down at first, but I get just as much done and I feel good on the way that I'm getting it done. And maybe I don't get as much done, but because I'm a little bit pickier about what's truly important.
But maybe you accomplish what you're meant to accomplish,
rather than is what I mean. Yes, as effective.
Yes,
doing what I'm doing.
You're not exhausting yourself on the hamster wheel, doing a bunch of stuff for the sake of doing them.
Right. Maybe
the things that you do are more spaced out, but they're on purpose. Mm-hmm. They feel aligned. You're engaged in the process. And this is the challenge. You're talking before about that I'll be happy when, I'll be joyful when, I'll be at peace when. We have to remember, and this is the thing I love about alchemy. Alchemy is the process. Mm. Life is the process of being here. It's not a destination. Women struggle with, what is my purpose? Well, your purpose is to explore life. Your purpose is to follow your curiosity. And as you said earlier, have experiences and not be limited by fear or the shoulds and the should nots. Yeah. And yeah, so if we could stop thinking about a destination and start thinking about the process, it makes time slow down,
Yeah.
for one thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And potentially you're not as productive, but boy, does it ever feel good, because you're not producing a bunch of crap.
It's really heartfelt then. I mean, I think that's part of, to bring him back in the creativity. That's what I realized is if I take my time with a painting, if I not think it out, but if I can feel it out, right? And be like, this feels good or whatever, I've already won. Like whether or not I'm going to hang that thing on the wall or not, I've already won because I've already gotten what I wanted out of it. And I know that we could continue talking like this forever. So I want our podcast listeners to hear that Dr. Lisa is going to be on our summit in June. So information will be out soon about that. We're going to have more to talk about because I'm sure we could talk about this stuff all day. But what I'm taking out of this conversation is if women can even just start with can I slow down for 15 minutes a day and ask myself, who am I? What's important to me? What do I value? Any of these questions where outside of being all of the roles, all these hats that we wear, if we can just say, but who is, insert name here, who is Lisa? Who is Christina? Who am I under all of these different things that I've piled on myself? I think that that's a huge call to starting to open this door. And of course, I would invite you all to go and find Forget About Having It All and peruse all of the knowledge that Dr. Lisa Petty has shared with us, and even more that she's learned during her. I'm imagining you learned a lot of this during your doctorate.
So the book is a combination of research findings and my own life experience. So putting theory into practice.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I know that you have a gift for our listeners for tuning in. What is that?
Oh, yes. Thank you. So for any woman who needs a little bit of practice getting out of her head and reconnecting with her body and putting herself first, and this just means, as you suggested, taking the time, right? So I call it mindful connection, just being aware of yourself. You can go and download a free self-guided program called Wellbeing Check-In. It's on my website, lisapetty.com/check-in. And that's really, it's fun. I did it initially as part of my doctoral research. Then I rolled it into my coaching, and I found it to be so valuable. Now I'm just giving it away. So please do take advantage of that.
Beautiful. Yes. I mean, I'm going to download it for sure because it looks like a good resource. So thank you so much for being here today and sharing all of this. I really appreciate you and your time.
Oh, it was lovely. I love talking about the power that women have if they would just remember it.
Yes. And we'll end on that note because that is beautiful. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in this week. We'll see you again next week. Hey, one more thing. When we are all more confident and full of self-love, we can act more intentionally and mindfully. What would a world like that look like? I want to know. One way that you can help me with this vision is to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps more than you know, and it's just a few clicks to help me create a more beautiful world. And as always, remember to be gentle with your humanness.